Hello, everybody. I'm Zenith Warrior Princess, the cutest of ghost buns, and welcome back to the Disney debate where Cat McBerry, Doug McBerry, and myself, and Kana in the background, talk about Disney films. And today we have something special, but before we get into that, how's it going today, Cat?
I'm gonna be sick. But I don't know if that's from the pregnancy or from what we just watched. It's hard to tell.
Yeah, I blame Remy. But this will probably be out for a while. But just so you guys know, we did. Cat is pregnant as a baby.
Yep.
It's a little chef.
I haven't gotten to the part where I'm enjoying pregnancy yet, so forgive me if I'm not the most energetic at this point.
I don't think there's any part we actually do enjoy pregnancy, but you never know.
I don't know either. I'm just rolling with the punches. Like right now, I'm here to talk about a shitty Disney film, so hopefully that distracts me enough.
Here's hoping. So we have Cat's reviewing for 2 today, and then we also have Doug. How's it going?
Toyland, boy am I really bored, land. Why was this movie such a pain to watch?
Yeah, this was a slog. We're gonna be talking about Babes in Toyland today, and I'm gonna put this out the way, like, before we get started, this was kind of a slog. In many respects, and it's like it has some iconic elements, it has some good musical numbers, and we're gonna talk about stuff as we go, and there's stuff that I really enjoyed, but a large portion of this movie I really just didn't care for. And so how we're approaching this, we actually not only watched the Disney version of Babes in Toyland, but Kat was like, hey, why don't we watch something better? So we also watched the Laurel and Hardy version to kind of compare and contrast. So before we get started, Kat, why don't you give us a brief summary of Babes in Toyland as the Disney version kind of puts it?
Oof, boy. So yeah, let me first explain something to y'all. I actually do have a pretty big history with Babes in Toyland, in a sense. I grew up with the Laurel and Hardy version, March of the Wooden Soldiers. I also watched the 1986 version with Drew Barrymore and Keanu Reeves. Those were my only 2 sources of knowledge regarding Babes in Toyland. I never read up on the original play, and I never saw the Disney version, believe it or not. Not until we had to watch it this past week. And oh lord, so one thing to point out, there has never been a Babes in Toyland version that has had the same exact plot. For a pretty good reason, which I will explain later. But right now, here's the plot of this particular version of Babes in Toyland. So, this of course takes place in a fantasy land where all of your favorite nursery rhyme characters happen to live together in the same town and they know each other. It's a whole big fantasy land. So our main characters are Tom and Mary, Tom the Piper's son, and Mary quite contrary from the nursery rhymes. They're engaged to be married, however, the person who wants to marry her more is Barnaby, based on the Crooked Old Man. And he finds out that she's supposed to inherit a rather large fortune, which he wants to marry into. So he plans to have his goons, Gonzorgo and Rodrigo, kidnap Tom, drown him in the ocean. That way he would be able to marry for himself, while also sabotaging her business, because apparently, herding sheep is a business. Who knew that? But yeah, the plan almost goes off without a hitch, except that the 2 henchmen, are your traditional dumb henchmen who don't kill the protagonist. No, they instead sell him off, hoping to reap reward, only for him to come back and foil Barnaby's plans. And then the plot kind of goes off the rails from there. Suddenly we have the toy maker, and they have issues making toys for Christmas. And Barnaby decides that, hey, I'm gonna sabotage stuff with this toy invention, and so that way I can force Mary to marry me by threatening murder. Trust me, it gets so convoluted from here. It's really hard to like keep this plot in like a linear, non-convoluted like synopsis. Like we'll get to
Yeah,
all
it's
that,
it's
but dear God.
it feels like it's two movies put together because like I'm watching it, it's like it's a decent setup. Like Mary wants to marry Tom, and they have all the I like the concept of the nursery rhymes. I didn't get all the nursery rhymes, but like it's a good setup. Then it just kind of goes off the rails in the middle and in the third act. Um, as for my history with this, I actually I remember watching a version of Babes in Toyland. I don't know which version as a kid, and it's just like as I was watching, I'm not sure if it was like the Laurel and Hardy version that I saw. I don't think it was this one. It could have been the '86 one, but I remember seeing like one version as a kid, and none of this lives up to it. And this was not what I expected. I went into this thinking that this was going to be like a Disney classic because I remember, the Toyland song. Toyland, Toyland, little girl in Boyland. That's a classic.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's because I went to like the Toyland theme park. Like, I don't know. Doug, what was your history with this film franchise?
Honestly, this is the first time I've actually seen a version of Babes in Toyland in its entirety. I think like I've seen bits and pieces when like we've gone for Thanksgiving, I think, to Kath's mother's house. And they're playing it on like Pix 11. I don't know. It's just like I've never really been all that interested. Like I think we saw the Nostalgia Critics review of the '80s one with Drew Barrymore and Keanu Reeves. And I think when I was a kid, there was like an animated one that was coming out, and I remember there were like posable figures that they were selling at Nathan's. The restaurants. But aside from that, yeah, I'm like, I have like no involvement whatsoever prior to this.
Yeah, like for me, it's kind of weird for me because like I can't remember which one I saw. Maybe it was the animated version. I'm gonna have to keep watching and see.
There are two animated versions of it that I know. There's a really old Rankin Bass version that is for free in its entirety on YouTube, but I don't recommend watching it. Yeah, I tried and I just couldn't. There's also a 97 version, which has better animation, but again, its whole plot is really convoluted because it tries to take place in a modern setting and it just doesn't work. Like, honestly, it's really hard to find a good version of Babes in Toyland because, like I said, none of them have the same exact plot. Heck, half the time they don't even have the same exact characters. Like, this is basically people picking and choosing what they liked about the original play and then trying to cobble it into a cohesive narrative that isn't too, like, jarring over the top or could potentially traumatize children.
Yeah, and to an extent, I think the first third of the Disney version worked okay. Like, as a theater kid, as a theater nerd, I appreciate it opened like a play, like a theater. And then it doesn't close like a play, so that's kind of like dropped altogether. But like one thing I really do appreciate about this version is the costume designs, the sets. Like, I think they really did go all out with the visual design to make it look like a theater production. And that, really shows in the first third until they abandon it. But, like, we're kind of going to get to that. What do you think about the sets and the costumes, Kat?
I actually think it's the biggest highlight of the entire movie because it really does make you feel like you're in a storybook. Everything is colorful. You see all like these characters, and like for the most part, you can look at them and tell who's who. And you see all these fantasy elements. You see like these mystical monsters and stuff, and like all these whimsy. Like in a way, it kind of does look like a Disney park too. Which, obvious, but at least it tries to be its own thing and have, like, immerse you in its setting, which for the most part it does. For what I read, the cinematographer, Edward Coleman, he's won a bunch of awards for cinematography, and particularly for his designs on films like The Absent-Minded Professor and Mary Poppins. And I mean, it definitely shows. The man, did a ton of films that we've reviewed and both will review from the 60s. So, it definitely has that eye-popping, eye-catching quality to it, for certain.
Mm-hmm. Especially because, when we open up, you see, oh, there's the shoe, and there's the giant pumpkin, and a lot of nursery rhymes. Now, granted, I'm not familiar with every nursery rhyme, but I do kind of like how some of it's weaved together. Bo Peep and Mary, and, Mary, I don't know if it's related to, Mary Had a Little Lamb.
No, it's Mary, Mary, quite contrary. How does your garden grow?
So, okay, I just didn't know if they were also referencing that.
No, they were also referencing Little Bo Peep. That was the whole sheep angle.
Okay. Yeah. There's so many nursery rhymes, and I can't keep track of them all. Mm-hmm. But, there's some that I just didn't get. I don't know anything about the Crooked Man, but I just, looking at this, going into this set, having Mother Goose starting the story, I think it's unique. I think it's very well opened up. Doug, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, honestly, production-wise, this movie looks so much better than it has any right to. I could be very, negative about, the acting and, some of the choices that they make, in terms of, the actual story. But when it comes to the production, when it comes to, like you said, the costumes, the background, the set, the effects work in particular for the time period is just so very good.
Especially the effect work, because there's two things that mm-hmm. I looked at and I still can't see the seams or how they did it. Mm-hmm. So there's a part in the beginning where Jack jumps over a candlestick and it gets higher and higher, and I assume that the candle comes from a trap door. But the thing is, it goes so high that it's clear that he has some sort of harness or string, but I can't see the strings.
Yeah, like I said, they really, it's clear where all the work really went to on this mm-hmm. movie. And it just really makes you wish you're watching a better acted, better written production. But yeah, to look at it, at least that is very pleasing. It's very colorful.
I also have to praise two instances of effects work where there's one where they hit Tom and he goes directly down into this bush. And I'm okay, I can kind of see how they did that, but it still looked really well done. But then there's a scene with Gonzorgo and Rodrigo where they're dancing and water is coming out of their outfits.
Oh my god, that was so ridiculous.
That's probably my favorite part.
Yeah, that's probably my favorite parts. And then, he falls into the water, but then they check the water and there's no trap door or anything, and the water doesn't fall through, so I don't know how they did that.
I know, it's I get it, the whole thing was a gag to go with the song, but, the fact that they were hiding that much water in their clothes to the point where it became, infinitely deep, that really got a chuckle out of me. It's yes, this makes no sense, but it's so funny, I don't care. Mm-hmm.
Alright, so, effect-wise, look-wise, visual-wise, I think it's fine. Let's talk about the actual story, though.
Oh,
you mean stories?
Stories. The first part, the first third is we have this villain, Barnaby, who's played by a legendary vaudeville actor, also known as the Scarecrow from The Wizard of Oz, which I was kind of stunned when I learned that. Mm-hmm. But it's he's played by Ray Bolger, and Ray Bolger does he's a legend. He's a great Snidely Whiplash type villain. He wants to get his hand on Mary's money, and he won't be happy till he gets it. And he employs two bumbling, kind of Jay and Silent Bob or Penn and Teller type figures, or I guess Laurel and Hardy, based on when this came out. to take the money. And so that's like the first part of it. It's like that part of it is okay. It's just before it goes off the rails, Kat.
Yeah, I will say one thing that they were very clear to point out, which I am very happy they did, because this is what distinguishes it from all other versions of Babes in Toyland that I've seen. Barnaby makes it clear he is only marrying Mary for her money. Like, emphasize money. Because in every other version I've seen, Barnaby just wants to marry her because he has the hots for her. And keep in mind, she's supposed to be like a teenager at the youngest, while he's a decrepit old man. Like, total cringe vibes, like every version I see it in. So I was glad at least he was clear in this version that yes, I just want her money. I don't give a shit about her. I just want her money. It's just a bonus she happens to be hot. So, you know.
Heck, he even sings a song with Gonzorgo about how he wants her money. And it's probably one of my favorite songs in the movie. And to be fair, he's not as old and decrepit as, like, other versions. Here, you know, Ray Bolger, for his age, looks really good.
Yeah, honestly, he probably looks like he could be 40 at the oldest at this point, even though I'm sure he was a lot older. So it makes it a lot more palatable, you know, seeing those two together. Again, we know he's the villain. He's obviously not going to get the girl, but, like, keep in mind, like, Mary, who's played by Annette Funicello, she was 18 at this point, like, which, you know, legally makes it okay, but still is cringe given the age difference. So,
yeah, it's a little bit iffy, and, like, they make her, like, they dress her up in these young girl dresses, and they make it like that. It's clear that there's a barrier here, and, like, I like Annette. I think she's an okay actress. I feel like Ray Bolger is the highlight of this segment. Aside from his song Castle in Spain. But we'll get to that.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to say real quick, like, I'm gonna be saying some negative things about Annette Funicello, which I know is sacrilege to people who are fans of the classic Disney era, but this is an example of, you know, they're trying to make her like a leading lady, but it's just not working because they're not giving her enough to do and not utilizing her talents properly. So apologies for the Annette slander that will occur. Just wanted to point that out.
And I do want to say, before I bring it over to Doug, I think the actors are fine. You have some really legendary actors that we've seen in plenty of other Disney films that we're going to be seeing again soon, and I'll point them out when we actually, like, talk about the actors, but, like, the writing and what they're given isn't always consistent. Doug.
Yeah, well, definitely I will say, you know, Ray Bolger is, like, among the few really, you know, the few actors there that's genuinely having a good time, you can tell. Like, he's just out there chewing the scenery, being as evil as he can, you know, doing his whole Snidely Whiplash mustache twirl. And it is, that at least makes it, you know, more palatable to get through, even though he is also, you know, very cringe and creepy. But it's like him and the two subordinates, they're probably among, like, the best part of the movie, and then, like, when Ed Wynn comes in, then you know, that's all the fun.
Yeah, like, this film has an all-star cast, and we'll get to that as we go, but, like, you have Ed Wynn, you have Ray Bolger, you have two characters from the Mark of Zorro that we talked about beforehand, like, Ed Wynn, you have Tommy Kirk, a lot of these returning characters. So it's like, I don't think it's the cast that makes it bad. It's the racism. I'm going to rip off the Band-Aid. So around a third of the way through the film, instead of drowning her husband-to-be at sea, they knock him out and they decide, hey, we're going to sell him to the Romani. and they don't use the term Romani, but that's the term I'm using. And there's this whole sequence where, you know, the Tom dresses up in Romani blackface and goes into this whole number. And this is just where the film kind of dives, because like the first third is like them plotting, them doing the dastardly deeds, and while there are some problems, I enjoyed it. But then like they start bringing the racism, and like he starts really creeping on her and saying like, "Well, I took you don't have any sheep, and your husband to be drowned at sea, so you have to marry me," and like. It kind of really goes downhill after that point, Kat.
Yeah, I will admit that, because, like, once they get to that point where they're like, they'll buy anybody, and I'm like, wow, I didn't know the Ramadi was into human trafficking, but okay, I guess it's the direction we're going with. But to be fair, that was in the original play, so you can't really blame Disney for that. You can blame them for deciding to include that. Like, you can blame them for deciding to include that, but it's still not, completely their fault. But yeah, that is pretty cringe. Although I will say another thing I find really cringe about this was after Tom gets sold off and Mary is told that he supposedly died at sea. And then she's trying to figure out, she's grieving and everything, and then suddenly learns that her sheep are gone. And suddenly that just destroys her whole business plan and stuff. Because apparently, since she's a girl, she doesn't know how to do the math. After only losing them for like a few hours, she's like, oh no, if I don't have my sheep, I won't keep my business going. I'll be poor and destitute. I absolutely have to marry Barnaby now. And it's like, girl, just get an accountant if you don't know how to math. Don't sing an entire song about how you don't know how to math. Like, you're just increasing the stereotype about women not knowing math.
Not only that, but this is the moment, the song in the film that really is the downturn. Like, Grease, where I'm trying to remember names here.
Hopelessly Devoted to You?
Yes, that's it. I'm sorry, I couldn't remember the name of the song.
Yeah,
so Hopelessly Devoted to You.
Yeah, Sandy played by Olivia Newton-John.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, go ahead.
So the way Hopelessly Devoted to You kind of ground Grease to a halt, that's the same thing I felt with I Can't Do the Sum, because it's just like, this could have been a memo, this could have been an email, like this could have been a sentence, and it just brings the film to a grinding halt. And after all the racism and now there's sexism, and then we have Castle in Spain where like Ray Bolger is just creeping at her and like doing this weird dance, and like we'll talk more about the numbers as we go, but like this whole sequence of the film was so weird.
You know what the sad thing is though? Again, I'm not trying to bash people here per se, but the actor who plays Tom, was it Tommy Sands? I didn't think he was that good of an actor in this, to be quite honest. I thought he was rather bland. The only time I actually thought his acting was pretty good was when he was playing the racial stereotype. I don't know if that's like a good or bad thing, or like, but it's the fact that I can give him credit for actually acting at that point. Like, I don't know. I'm severely conflicted about that.
So like this is like, you bring this film to a grinding halt. You have the racism, and then they find out our sheep are stolen, and it's like, oh, we followed the tracks for the sheep into the forest of no return. So they chase the sheep. Like a bunch of the kids go into the forest, and they get stopped by talking trees. And this is the weirdest moment for me, because like you have a bunch of weird costumes for the trees. Everything else in the movie looks fine, but the tree costumes are so weird. And like you have the song about how like you stumbled into the forest of no return. You didn't see the signs. Now you must stay with us. And I'm like, what? Why? What? It's because you trespassed in here. Now you can't leave. Like, we'll just leave. Like, we'll get out of your hair. No, you gotta stay. I'm like, this doesn't make sense.
Even the fucking trees walk in this movie, man.
Just further proof that
Doug, what are your thoughts on this part of the film?
Further proof that that Disney still wants Wizard of Oz. It's like first they've got Ray Bolger, now they got basically the set from the Yellow Brick Road where the trees are throwing apples at everybody.
There were definitely like parts where I felt like Wizard of Oz, especially the opening number. Like, it definitely felt like, to me, like a Wizard of Oz play or something like that. Like, it was trying its best.
Well, to be fair, that's because this was supposed to be.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, honestly, this is where, like, it really feels like you start to watch a different movie entirely, because it's like, they get halfway through whatever the hell the first half is, and then they're like, oh yeah, we still have to do Toyland for Babes in Toyland. So now we're just gonna switch to that.
Yeah, there's barely any Toyland in Babes in Toyland. But before we get to that, Kat, tell us a little bit more about how this was supposed to be a Wizard of Oz film.
Yeah, so we all know at this point sort of Disney's sordid history with desperately either trying to gain the rights to Wizard of Oz or trying to make their own Wizard of Oz, to varying degrees of success and failure. Well, one of their very first attempts, they tried to do basically a version of the book Ozma of Oz called Rainbow Road to Oz, and it was supposed to feature the cast of the Mouseketeers, you know, doing like a sort of lighthearted, like straight to TV type version of it, and they were even going to have Annette play Princess Ozma. And you can tell that they already had most of the set made because pretty much the set was used for Babes in Toyland. I mean, it's kind of obvious. It's particularly the characters of the talking trees. But unfortunately, they ended up scrapping that because by that point, you know, TV was becoming more prominent. They were starting to show old movies again, both on screen and in theaters. They re-released Wizard of Oz, and of course, Disney realized in comparison their project was pretty weak and would not be well received because of it. So, hence, they ended up scrapping that entire project and just reusing it for Babes in Toyland. And they wouldn't attempt to do anything Wizard of Oz related again until Return to Oz in 1985. So, yeah, once again, adds to the whole history of Disney just trying so desperately to gain this property and just failing at it miserably.
Yeah, and I mean, like, we see what happened with the later Oz films. I haven't seen Oz the Great and Powerful yet, but like it's gotten bad reviews.
It is absolutely atrocious. I do not recommend seeing that film.
So it's like strike three, but like, so we're halfway through the film, and I was saying to myself, I live tweet when I watch stuff for the Disney debate, so I can get my thoughts together. I do research, but a lot of times, like, I will keep stopping and starting because, like, I want to understand what I'm watching. It's not that I'm not paying attention, it's that I'm trying to compartmentalize my thoughts. When it came to this, a lot of it was like, oh, this feels like Wizard of Oz. It feels very weird. Where's Toyland? You have an actor who's the Scarecrow from the original Wizard of Oz playing the villain. It's weird. And then it just becomes a different movie. Because apparently the trees are like, okay, so you and the villains and Tommy and Mary, they all get captured by the trees because they trespass on the Force of No Return. So they're sent to Toyland, which apparently only has 2 people in it. Which is like, how are you keeping this running? So, like, I have several questions off the bat, because my mind is spiraling when I think of that. Okay, why is there a toy shop in the middle of nowhere? Why is the Force of No Return barring passageway if they're making toys for people? Why wasn't this set up in the first place? We later learn that Edwin is the toy maker, is the mayor, the sheriff, and whatever of Toyland. But why is the Force of No Return blocking everything? Like, I am so confused, and this is only the first part of this new segment. Kat?
Well, we had to make the title Babes in Toyland make sense somehow, right? I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, this is kind of based off the original operetta, because like they do have kids that end up like getting lost in the forest, and by ways end up in Toyland meeting the toy master. So it kind of stays true to that, but again, the way they do it through this means is just so convoluted, and it's basically going off children logic where, whereas most adults would be in the situation and try to fight their way out, the kids just go along with it because they're too scared to do anything otherwise. So yeah, like, we get there and you expect a place called Toyland to be more magnificent. I mean, it looks like a palace and everything. In fact, it looks like the palace in Disney World. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. Product placement. But yeah, like, you see the inside and it's just, they have a cool toy making machine. They have toys laying about, but there's a total of 2 people that apparently run the entire operation, and one of them is an incompetent buffoon. It makes no sense. And they kind of hint that, well, they're making this for Santa Claus to deliver toys, but you never see him or really hear his name or have any indication that they're associated with the North Pole whatsoever. So it's like, suddenly we have a new crisis. It's like, oh no, we can't make toys. How will we get all the toys to the kids for Christmas? And then everyone's like, oh, we'll volunteer because we're good people. And it's like, okay, what happened to the plot of this movie? I thought we were being chased by the bad guys.
Suddenly the plot is child labor. It's a sweatshop.
Yep. I guess the elves went on strike or unionized or something.
Yeah, like, it's my headcanon that the Toy Master is actually Santa Claus in disguise. It's never said. He just says, oh, no, we'll never have enough toys for Christmas. Okay. But it's weird if he is Santa, or if he is making toys for Santa. The shop is covered in cobwebs everywhere. Like, you'll look at it and there's nobody there. And there's a no trespassing sign. I'm like, why? What? Doug?
Yeah, I'm equally as confused by the whole, methodology of getting into Toyland, of what Toyland even is, and apparently it's politics. This guy's basically like, Edwin's basically the everything in Toyland, and then only seems like there's a population of 2 people.
Like, it feels like they ran out of budget by this point in the film. Because, like, from what I heard, the toy machine was the most expensive thing to make in the entire production. Because, again, I think they shot this in London or something, so they had to convert it, so it was like £1,000 to make. So, I don't know how much that is in American dollars, but pretty expensive.
Let me do some maths. I won't adjust for inflation, but 1,000... that is $1,274. Now, adjust that. When did this film come out?
1961.
Oh my god. So that would be about $12 million.
Yep.
If my math is correct.
See, I told you, they spent the rest of the budget on that machine alone, not to mention the animation for the toy soldiers, so no wonder the rest of the film is so hollow looking.
And that's so weird, because, like, they use it for 5 minutes.
And it breaks.
And it's just like, and then we have the child sweatshop, and it's funny. It's really stupid, because I love Edwin. Edwin is one of the best, greatest comedic Disney actors. But he starts off by saying, oh, no one wants to work today. Kids don't want to work today. And then he's just like, you want to work for me? And he puts all the children, who are probably like 10 years old, in a sweatshop making toys for Santa, supposedly. Like, what in the fuck?
It's like, dude, why aren't you working? If you're the toy master and you're in charge of everything, why are you just sitting around on your ass doing nothing, letting your teenage genius design all this shit which you immediately break?
Oh, no one wants to work anymore. I need to get child labor.
Nobody wants to work anymore unless they're being paid. That's what he meant to say.
Yeah. What?
I
What?
wonder,
These people
like,
want
part of me
benefits?
wonders
They're
if
all
this is-
fired.
Part of me wonders if this was all like actually like a parody of the times, like them making fun of people, or if they were serious. I don't know. All I know is that his assistant Grumio is
Rumio.
played by Tommy Kirk,
Yeah.
and one of the kids that is with them is played by Arliss. I know he has an actual name, but I call him Arliss. So
it's the first
you have
time. Yeah, first time they haven't been siblings in a film, which honestly is a good thing.
it's the first time I actually liked Arliss's acting for a while, but also
barely
like
does
they really
anything in
wasted
it.
Tommy Kirk in this.
Yeah, I
What's
gotta
that?
say,
It's like, because he barely does anything in this.
Well, I
he
mean,
keeps his
true.
mouth shut for the most part.
good.
Yeah.
But honestly, I think it's a shame though, because Tommy Kirk like has probably the most different role I've ever seen him in all the stuff we reviewed of him. Because, you know, he's usually like the leading man. He usually like is either just a nice kid or he can be a jerk or whatever. But like this is the first time he's had to really embody a specific character, like particularly an intellectual genius. Like he makes these experiments out of like nothing. Like within a few hours. Like this kid is brilliant. And, you know, he really should be praised and should be, like, working somewhere where, like, he's making, like, a fortune and stuff. Instead, he's at the mercy of Ed Wynn, who just chastises him every chance he gets, sabotages all of his inventions, and then just calls him a dumbass for not thinking them through because he didn't have the hindsight to prepare for Ed Wynn and ultimately abusing and destroying it. Like, it is such a shame that he has that role, which he does well, but is just shafted most of the time in favor of the lead.
He does well, but he is wasted in the film because, like, you see some really brilliant moments where he's just like, oh, how do I get more of this object? And he's just like, oh, I didn't think that far. He's a brilliant but absent-minded inventor, kind of like a small version of the absent-minded professor. But Edwin comes in, just messes with his invention, doesn't listen to an explanation of how it works, says, I am the chief inventor here, messes it up,
Okay,
and blames
boomer.
it on Glumio. So, the last part of the film, and like, you may have noticed, like, what happened to Barnaby? He's not in, like, 20 minutes of this film, and while they're making toys, he suddenly gets a hold of one of the inventions, shrinks the toy maker, and has the toy maker as mayor marry him and Mary together. There's a climax. It doesn't make sense. It's a lot of stupid.
Yeah, basically there's a shrink ray involved. Again, it's one of Grumio's inventions, which in a sense, might be useful if not applied to toys, because again, you need a lot of material to do what he's proposing. But again, because the toy master is such a dumbass, he throws the shrink ray out the window and into the hands of the villain. And he's like, hey, I can use this to my advantage. And so he shrinks the toy master, and then he shrinks Tom, and then he threatens Mary, saying, I'm going to kill them both unless you marry me. So now we've graduated to full-on, like, almost murder here, because if he shoots them with the shrink ray again, they disappear into nothingness. That's not traumatizing or anything.
And the whole while, like, they try to start redeeming Gonzorgo and Rodrigo because they decide, yeah, we're not down with this. I'm like, you guys were singing about murder earlier, but they just redeem the bumbling villains and they help. And it's like this whole big climax with them. It takes forever, a large portion of the movie that they animate, but Tommy's character takes all these toy soldiers that are suddenly becoming alive, and they use their guns against the villain, and it's so weird, and it shouldn't work, and it doesn't.
The ending is like the most stupidest thing in the entire movie. Like, I'm just like sitting there watching it and turning to Doug, and I'm like, this is dumb. Oh my god.
We just reviewed the Santa Claus 2, and I would take that climax over this.
Like, that at least had a little more stakes to it than this did. Because, like, at least in Santa Claus 2, they were facing giant soldiers, which, granted, they weren't able to move that well, but they still could pose a threat to the elves who are, like, half their size. So there's at least a bit of threat in that sense, whereas here, you have these tiny-ass little wooden soldiers who suddenly become sentient and start firing their little toy weapons at Barnaby, who I mentioned is still normal size, and he just stands there and takes it as they're just shooting him. And even, like, Tom, who's also miniature at this point, is trying to, like, throw stuff at him, and Barnaby's just standing there laughing at all this. It's like, wow, you really diminished the threat of this whole situation. Like, if Barnaby had any sense, he would have taken a bat and just went to town on all of them. And then this would have been over in, like, 2 minutes. Like,
yeah, it's
the
like,
whole thing was dumb.
This is why, and we're going to talk about the Laurel and Hardy version a bit, but this is why the Laurel and Hardy version had them life size.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is part of the reason why I insisted that you watch March of the Wooden Soldiers, because the setup for the Wooden Soldiers was done so much better in that version. And that version is at least, like, 30 years older. And they had a better concept of how to build up to the big
They set up
climax of the
the
film.
toy maker and Santa Claus.
Exactly. Like, they explain why these soldiers are big, why they're sentient, how they work, why they're threatening. So, yeah, you actually are, like, relieved when you see them at the climax of the film. Whereas here it's like, cool, we get these sentient toys out of nowhere, and they don't do shit. Again, the only reason they get away with this is because the freaking villain chooses to be a dumbass at this point.
With that being said, before I bring it over to Doug, this film, like, so much of it just comes out of nowhere. You can clearly tell it was trying to be something else beforehand, and it just kind of sucks that, like, the best part of the film is the opening, and it just slowly devolves. Doug, thoughts on the finale?
Yeah, basically, I don't know how much new information I can add. It's like, again, like I said earlier, the effects work on everything is good. The definitely shows where the budget went to with the stop animation for the March of the Wooden Soldiers. And then, yeah, like, the battle's so stupid because, yeah, Ray Bolger's just standing there taking it, and he's, like, kicking a lot of the soldiers and stuff. But meanwhile, like, while he's distracted, Mary's just kind of sitting there, like, all worried and stuff. It's like she could use the opportunity at any time to, like, grab the shrink gun and, use it on Barnaby. But no, she's just, like, sitting there all terrified and crap. And I think eventually she does wind up getting it, but it takes forever. Again, like I said, just some of the decisions made here. What were they thinking?
Even worse, after she uses it, instead of just going over and instantly stomping Barnaby to death, she just stands there and watches Barnaby and Tom get into, like, a dueling match. And it's like, lady, your husband-to-be might potentially die right here, and you're standing there watching them with the most bored look on your face. It's like, intervene! You're still normal size! Again, just stop Barnaby to death instead of just sitting there useless. Like, I get that was a thing from, like, early films where the love interest always stands off to the side helpless while the man and the villain duke it out, to show whose penis is bigger, but come on, it's like common sense here.
Also, I just looked this up. Okay, so the budget for the film was $3 million. $3 million in interest, like inflation, adjusting for inflation, is $30 billion today that was put on this film. And I think half of the budget went to that one machine that was 5 minutes in. Like,
yeah.
And it's sad, considering they reused, like, scenery and stuff from, like, a previous project. So it's like, so what did they spend the rest of the money on? Was it to the effects?
Maybe the actors, but, like...
It had to have been the effects.
All those water effects, man, the costume.
Yeah.
The effect work is good, but like this plot, it's clearly like a last minute rewrite. The writing and the meshing of two things that are completely unrelated together hurts the film. However, let's talk about the good. Let's talk about the actors and the songs before we move on to the Laurel and Hardy version and talk about stuff like that. When it comes to the actors, I think this is where the film really shines. Obviously, we talked about Ray Bolger, who is the Scarecrow from The Wizard of Oz. You have Gonzorgo and Rodrigo were the henchmen from the film Zorro, which we reviewed previously. You have Arliss, and you have Tommy Kirk from Absent-Minded Professor, not Absent-Minded Professor, the Shaggy Dog, and from God, I'm forgetting the name of this film. Why? The dog movie.
The Shaggy Dog?
Not the Shaggy Dog, the other dog
Shaggy
movie.
DA?
No, the one that came before it that they got their start in.
Oh, Old Yeller?
Yes, so Tommy Kirk and Arliss from Old Yeller, Shaggy Dog, Shaggy DA, like you have these people who would go on for later. The only one who wasn't a staple from Disney was Tommy, who is apparently a pop artist. I don't really know too much about Tommy Sands, but I mean he did an okay job.
Yeah, I mean he looks the part. You know, he's basically one of those like typical like teen idols that you see in the front of a magazine. Like, I tried looking him up. I didn't really recognize a lot of stuff that he was in. But, I mean, I thought he did well enough. I still feel like his acting was bland for the most part, except when he was playing the stereotype. So, I mean, give him A for effort, I guess, and at least for being a decent singer. But, I don't know. I thought he was among the weaker parts of the movie.
And Annette Funicello is going to be more of a staple as we go. From what I understand, like, she was in the Mickey Mouse Club. I'm looking here. She was also in the Shaggy Dog.
Right, I think she was the love interest.
Yeah. So, like, we do have a person who's decent in that role. I just don't think they give Mary enough to do. A lot of my love goes to Gonzorgo and Rodrigo because they're like the more fun, and I think Ray Bolger does a great job as a Snidely Whiplash type villain, except for the fact where he takes it too far. He's a vaudeville legend, but I think they go too over the top with his character, and they go a little bit too far in some scenes where they're just like, are you trying to make him comedic or are you trying to make him villainous? And you can have both. I don't think it was done very well. So I feel like, and I mean, like, you have Ed Wynn too, and Ed Wynn's usually amazing at everything. I just don't like his character. So you have this amazing slew of actors, but the material that they have to work with is just not good, Kat.
Yeah, the writing is easily the weakest thing and is what ruins the film overall because, again, I know it's tough because nobody wants to mimic the plot of the original Babes in Toyland. Like, I'll get to that later about what it actually is, but the point is, to make this film work, especially for modern audiences, you know, of any decade, they had to take a lot of liberties, and they had to do things that, you know, would make it sense, that would, you know, pad it out a little bit so it was movie length. So, you know, obviously they didn't have like, you know, a line for line script to go off of, but the stuff they did, again, it goes by child logic. It's like, you know, you have to suspend your disbelief for like so many things to the point where it doesn't make sense anymore. And again, from the narrative perspective, like, you basically have two different stories here. Like, the whole, and some of the stuff just gets forgotten about. Like, the whole reason they go into the forest was to look for Mary's sheep. Mary's sheep are never found, are never mentioned again. They could be dead for all we know. It's just, they transition to where we need to go in order for the title to make sense. We have that whole climactic battle between the hero and the villain, and then happily ever after. It's like, the connection is just so weak. And this, the fact that they're having these characters, like, first they establish them as smart, and then they become dumb, and then, they're doing stuff that doesn't make sense on, on sensible or logistical levels. It's baffling. It's like nobody gave, like, the first draft a second read-through just to make sure it made sense. And it's a shame because, like you said, some of these actors who are pretty good in other things are given nothing to work with in this. And it's just it's so disappointing that it's so bland. Like, this is Toyland. This is supposed to be a fantasy-type setting where anything is possible, where magic exists. And we're just getting just blah.
Doug?
Well, I guess when life gives you lemons, don't have a lemonade. You just, make whatever the hell this is.
When God gives you lemons, you find a new God.
But
God,
yeah, I'm like...
And there's just a lot.
I can't. Yeah, it's like, again, it's so really... Everything production-wise, everything visually is so good. It's just such a shame that it's in this poor excuse for a movie.
Speaking of which, let's talk about the songs. Now, some of it I do like. I really love the villain song, We Won't Be Happy Till We Get It, which is based off an original song that has no relation to the original operetta. Kat showed me that, and I'm like, okay. But We Won't Be Happy Till We Get It is one of my new favorite villain songs, and it's Gonzorgo and Rodrigo at their best. And you see, because, what's his name? Henry Calvin. I was going to say Henry Calville, but no. Henry Calvin is like this really deep baritone, and I love his singing voice, and he really sells it. And he's like, we won't be happy till we get it. Like, that really got me. And Slowly He Sank Into the Sea.
Oh, that was the best.
Yeah.
That was the best. Because it's just them talking about, like, the villain's being transparent villain. Like, he keeps asking them, like, questions about, like, stuff. And they're reading off a blank piece of paper that he apparently did. And it goes so over the top that it's fun, where the water is coming out of their outfits as they're singing, and they go into it. It's just a great number.
And it's just like getting deeper, like somehow it's like warping the sidewalk to the point where it's like getting
warping
deeper
the sidewalk.
water.
Again, I don't know how they did some of the effects work in this, but this is probably the best song in the movie.
But you want to know something ironic? So most of these songs, like I said, are from the original operetta, which was written by Victor Herbert. So obviously some of those songs don't work in the context of the film, so they had to get the music adapted and rewritten, which is where George Bruns comes in. And in terms of Slowly He Sank Into the Bottom of the Sea, George Bruns wrote that entirely by himself. That's probably like one of the only original songs in the show, and it's easily the best. Which is kind of sad when you think about it.
It's sad because, like, I wanted more of that. And then we get Castle in Spain. I've been waiting to talk about this for a long time. I'll let you talk in a minute, but I'm sorry. I need to talk about this song. So, essentially, this is right after, Slowly He Sank Into the Sea. Mary learns that her husband is dead. And so Ray immediately propositions her in this, and she says no, and he's like, no, let me give you this song and dance number. And it starts off pretty good, where he, like, starts to wine and dine and romance her, but then he turns slowly into the bowler hat guy from Meet the Robinsons as he dances and then does, like, a bull fighting thing and, like, plays with the water, and the dance goes on for way too long. And I'm just like, how is this supposed to impress her?
I mean, I get why they have the show-stopping dance number in there. That was a thing of the times. Not to mention they were trying to highlight Ray Bolger's dancing abilities, which are legendary. So I can sort of understand that. But yeah, again, it's one of those numbers where it needlessly stops the plot dead, and it's like you have to have a really good attention span, or the number has to be really good in of itself for you to pay attention. So yeah, I mean, honestly, the whole time I'm just watching this, I'm just thinking of two things. I'm either thinking of the phrase, I need an adult, or I'm thinking, FBI, open up!
I am an adult. Now, I will say, Ray Bolger's dancing is legendary, and he puts it here, but he does things with this cape that, I'm sorry, capes can be cool. Capes can be cool. But not here.
I guess they wanted to do a whole Matador thing, and it just didn't work. It just... I don't know.
I get what they were going for, but I think the directing and the choreography on the dance just like, you're better than this, Ray.
And it's a shame too, because they had some good choreographers for this. Like, some of the dance numbers are actually pretty damn good. In fact, the director himself was even a choreographer. Like, he taught Shirley Temple how to tap dance. So there was definitely, like, you know, talent behind this in terms of the choreography. It's just, I don't know, some of those numbers, I kind of question, you know, what the whole concept behind them was.
In I think part of the problem is it mixes two different genres. You have vaudeville dancing with, like, I guess, like, they wanted to make it, like, Italian or Spanish dancing as well, and it just doesn't really mesh too well. Anything to add, Doug, before I move on?
Show-stopping number? Why, if this show were going any slower, we'd be going backwards.
Now if we had Statler and Waldorf riffing this movie, then I would enjoy it.
That'd be amazing. And it would work because it's in a play setting.
The opening number, I think, was pretty good. It's not the best, but, like, it's pretty good. But then you have stuff like Never Mind Bo Peep and I Can't Do the Sum stopping the film in its tracks for 2 numbers in a row. Then you have the racist number with Floretta. And
make it stop! Make it stop!
Make the racism stop.
My freaking ears!
I will say, real quick, I find it funny that the whole reason that number comes about is because Barnaby finally convinces her to accept his marriage proposal, which he does in the dead of night. And then he forcibly wakes up the whole town just to announce that they're getting married. And somehow he was able to get the Romani show up in the middle of the night just to do this whole number. And I'm just thinking to myself, these poor town folk, they're like, I just want to sleep. Why are we dealing with all these, with all this nonsense?
Yeah. Also, if I were the 2 henchmen at that point, the minute I hear the term for the Romani, I would be running.
They acknowledge it, but they are stay. It's like, aren't these the same tribe that we sold that guy to? And it's like,
they should have run out of town and not looked back.
The thing is, they never explain why the Romani, like, didn't do anything with him. Like, I guess they bought him, but they never intended to keep him. And then when he explained his story, he convinced them to help him return to town and expose Barnaby. But we never see any of that. It's like,
we never get an explanation for, like, how that kind of ends up. It's so weird. It's like,
it would have redeemed, like, their whole stereotype about the Romani too, because, you know, again, they see a sign for where they're living and they're like, oh, well, we'll just sell it to them because, you know, Romani are known for buying people. And it's like, well, actually, they're not. They're cool people. And in fact, they help him get back home and, you know, expose that whole vile plot.
If they had we never get another scene where they didn't, like, pay, they like, cheated Gonzorgo and they're like, oh, yeah, we didn't pay him. But that's just because we don't pay for people, and so, like, we're gonna get one over. Like, if they had another scene like that, that would be fine.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just, like, we get these back-to-back nothing musical numbers, then the racist number that ends with nothing, everything being resolved, but not explained. Then we had the Force of No Return, which is catchy, but it also makes no sense. A lot of these other numbers are kind of like, Toyland is pretty good, but I don't like this version of the theme song. workshop is a sweatshop, yay! And then there's another one I've been wanting to talk about, Just a Toy, where Tom and Mary are singing together, and Mary compares herself to a doll for Tom. What in the... It got really sexist in that part. I was like, no.
Yeah. Honestly, I probably blocked that out of my mind, because by that point, I was, like, so bored with this film and just, like, waiting for stuff to happen. I kind of ignored most of that number, especially when she started comparing herself to a doll. I'm like, girl, I know sex dolls aren't really a thing at this point, or at least they're not common knowledge, but you're painting a really unsavory image right here.
I know that back in the day that, like, girls were supposed to be prim, proper little dolls, but, like, it's just so bad to look back on. And March of the Toys is March of the Toy Soldiers. This soundtrack is so hit or miss for me, because, like, there are things that I really love and that I think will stay with me, but there's some parts that are just like, I could have done without them. The film would have been a lot shorter. And then there's some that I'm just like, I want to throw them into the sun. Doug.
Yeah, it's like I said, slowly he sank into the sea. Was like the highlight of the whole thing. Everything else is either kind of bland or very problematic in some way, shape, or form. And just, in some cases, not even pleasant to listen to.
Yeah, so it's a lot. Kat, any thoughts on that before we move on to the Laurel and Hardy version?
I mean, it's hard to really defend because, again, most of these are songs from the original operetta, and, they are technically, in a sense, considered classics, but, like, I can see why. I mean, in fact, some of these songs even appear in the Laurel and Hardy version, and, yeah, they're not really that much better. I mean, you still have the iconic March, you still have the iconic Toyland song, but, like, yeah, a lot of them just tend to be forgettable, and here's the thing, like, the original play was really, really long. Like, we're talking a 3-act play here. In fact, a good portion of the songs when the play moved from New York to Chicago, it got cut, and understandably so. In fact, one of the songs that got cut was actually the original version of the villain song, We Won't Be Happy Till We Get It. So, yeah, that should tell you something about how people felt about the music. So, yeah it's like, really hard to...
I'm not an opera connoisseur. I'm gonna put this out there. I think the only opera I saw was Carmen, and most of that was from Hey Arnold. So I'm a plebe. I'm a casual. I don't know much about operettas, but like from my understanding in the way they showcase songs, a lot of this
opera,
I don't.
Doc?
Now I'm just thinking of from that Simpson episode where they get snowed in the school. Like, despite the fact that there's a huge snowstorm, Principal Skinner makes them come to school anyway, and because the teachers had conveniently gotten out of coming to school, he pretty much entertains them by showing them his version of Babes in Toyland, and it's pretty much exactly the same experience while we were watching it, where the play was like over 3 hours long, and the kids are sitting there bored out of their mind, and they're just pointing out all of the bad inconsistencies and stuff about, like, the movie, and, like, why stuff doesn't make sense, and they even pointing out, like, you can see a boom mic in this shot, and you can see one of the staff in the back holding a coffee, and all that. So, like, I felt like this is exactly what we went through watching this film.
Yeah, it just devolves as it goes on, and it's like, Now, thankfully, I was actually watching this at like 3 a.m, so that was even worse. And then, like, Kat was just like, let's watch the Laurel and Hardy version. So I saw that at 4 a.m, and it was way better. But before we get into that, I have to say something, a confession I have to make. I am a casual. I have committed the cardinal sin of I didn't know who Laurel and Hardy was for the longest time. I knew the Three Stooges, but I had never seen anything of them. And Abbott and Costello, I only know because who's on first. I had to ask Kat, and it's just like I know, I am. What I forget the phrase that I use, but I'm a filthy casual. I didn't know any of this stuff.
You are uncultured.
What I knew was
swine.
Drake and Josh. That was my Abbott and Costello.
Ugh.
You
Don't
didn't
even
watch
make the
Kenan
comparison.
and Kel.
I did watch Kanan and Kel, but that was a little bit different. I watched a little bit of different type of comedy. Like I watched I Love Lucy, but that was a little bit different.
I will forgive
so
you.
it's like there was a lot of things that I haven't seen. But then we watched the Laurel and Hardy version. I'm like, I like it so much better. It's the dynamic that Laurel and Hardy have is kind of like Penn and Teller or Jay and Silent Bob. You have a character who is a buffoon and a character who is the schemer type. And where it kind of differs is like the Jay and Silent Bob comparison makes more sense in the Disney version. But with Laurel and Hardy, they both speak, but just one not so much. You know, you have the bumbling idiot and the schemer. And this is a dynamic that's been done for a very long time, but this was clearly based on Laurel and Hardy. So, Kat, why don't you give us a description of the film?
With pleasure. Yeah, like I said, I grew up with this film. I would watch it every Thanksgiving / Christmas like clockwork. Like they always showed it on Pix 11. I have it on DVD, and it's to me the standard version of Babes in Toyland. Again, for one thing, it actually takes place in Toyland. So yeah, it's kind of a similar scenario where you have the creepy Barnaby. He wants, in this version, to marry little Bo Peep, who is the daughter of the old woman that lives in the shoe. And, yeah, obviously, Bo Peep wants nothing to do with him. She's actually in love with Tom Tom, the Piper's son. They want to get married. But Barnaby, in his scheming ways, wants to get rid of Tom. So he takes advantage of, the nursery rhyme that Tom Tom's famous for. Tom Tom, the Piper's son, stole a pig and away he runs. So he actually.
Oh, that's what that's from. I've never heard of that one.
Yeah, so that's where the whole concept comes from. So Barnaby ends up actually kidnapping one of the 3 little pigs and then frames Tom for his kidnapping / murder because while they don't find a body, they do find pig sausage in his home. So old King Cole, who is, the leader of the town, has Tom arrested and sentenced to Bogeyland, which is this version of the Forest of No Return. And that's where he gets banished. But then they discover that, oh, wait, the pig was actually alive the whole time. So, so now it's a race to save Tom, but also get Barnaby, who realizes he's in deep shit, and he also escapes to Bogeyland. So, and here's the thing with Bogeyland. It's full of literal bogeyman. As in these, goblin creatures which are absolutely terrifying and want to kill everything.
Dang it, Doctor Who.
Yeah, and the whole thing with Laurel and Hardy is that they are Little Bo Peep's brothers, who, again, live with the old woman who lives in a shoe. And the whole reason that, she is open to having Bo Peep marry is because Barnaby is rich and their house is about to be foreclosed upon. That's what happens when you have that many kids. So they're trying in vain, to work for the toy maker to get a raise so they can gain money and thus, save Bo Peep from this marriage. The problem is because they're a bumbling duo, it doesn't go over that well. But they do end up making the wooden soldiers who end up saving the day in the end. So, yeah, there's a lot going on in this, and it actually ties together pretty damn well, considering. It's don't get me wrong, Laurel and Hardy, despite being the bumbling sidekicks, are actually the main leads of this film. They carry and affect everything, which they rightfully so, since they're easily the best actors in the movie. But,
it's funny because in this version, we actually have a setup. They work for the toy maker. The toy maker has an order for Santa Claus. They get the order wrong because they're bumbling idiots, and they get out on their asses. But later on in the film, they save the day, and it's just it's a lot of back and forth between them and Barnaby, who looks like he gets greener and greener the more he goes, and I'm pretty sure that he's actually a boogeyman in disguise.
That would be a good twist, honestly, and it would make sense why he actually works with the boogeyman in the end, because for whatever reason, they obey only him. They don't try and kill him, and it's never explained. So, yeah, like, and the fact that he knows a secret way to get to Bogeyland, like, that would have made so much sense to reveal that, yeah, he actually is a boogeyman in disguise. Like, it doesn't matter regardless, because the climax is epic. Like, the boogeyman break into Toyland, they're kidnapping everybody, presumably they kill and eat them, and so Laurel and Hardy activate all of these wooden soldiers that they accidentally created who go to town, like, beating the shit out of the boogeyman. Like, it is a lot of fun to watch.
And not only that, but they're the ones who get they're the ones who get Bo Peep out of the marriage, because like the whole thing is because their siblings are like, no, we can't stand for this, so they trick Barnaby into marrying Hardy.
Well, the stand
in one of the best parts of the films, in this, like, and I'll pronounce you you may now kiss the bride, and they put the veil up and it's him, and I'm just like, I was laughing for a solid minute.
That is one of my favorite parts of the film.
And then he actually realized, like, oh, you gotta stay here. You're married to Barnaby now. I was like, I don't want to marry Barnaby.
I don't
love him. And it's just like, I love that they go that route, because they very easily could have made it homophobic, but they don't. They're just like, I just don't love him. And I'm like, I love this movie.
Yeah, like I said, that's why, to me, it's the definitive thing. And if you compare it to Disney's Babes in Toyland, it's like apples and oranges. Like, yes, they have some of the same characters, they have some of the same plot points, but it is not the same. Like, it is amazing to me how a film made in 1934 has so much more going for it than a version made by the Disney company in 1961, when Walt was still alive. It's like, dude, where's the disconnect here? How did you fall so far from grace with this?
It's a lot, especially because we saw some behind the scenes stuff, and Disney was flat on promoting it. Now, granted, this was around the time where he was mostly focusing on his theme park. I think, was it 101 Dalmatians was when he kind of stepped away from that particular limelight?
Yeah, because by that point his health was failing him, and he was more interested in getting, world, like, both, like you said, the parks, particularly Epcot, going, trying to get some of his more, like, big fantasy things off the ground before he inevitably, passed. So, yeah, he wasn't as invested. Like, obviously he's still promoted, because, that's what a good businessman does. You promote your product so you get the money, but it's clear that, he didn't have as big a hand in this as he should have had.
Yeah, and it's such a shame, because, like, watching these two films back to back is like night and day, because I don't think the Laurel and Hardy version has as many good actors. There's a lot of characters that I don't really care about, but it doesn't matter, because the through line of the plot works so much better, and the main characters are there, and you have stakes, and yeah, the effect work isn't as good, but it still looks great for its time. Personally, I would advise watching on Amazon Prime. It is free with ads if you want to check it out, or on YouTube. It's not the colorized version on YouTube, but like, check this out. It's free. It's great. Doug,
I don't really have much I can say, given that I did not see the older Babes in Toyland, March of the Wooden Soldiers, but I would imagine it's probably a lot better than what we saw.
I know I showed it to you at one point. You probably just forgot.
Probably did.
It's just a shame, because, like, you can clearly see that, the Disney version is not a complete product. It is two things stitched together, and they try their best to sell it, but they just don't. Overall, skip the Disney version, watch the Laurel and Hardy version. Kat?
Shall I tell you what the original plot was of this? Like, the original 1903 operetta?
Oh boy. Oh, I've been waiting for this.
Okay. Yeah, I figured let's go over both those films first, and then we'll compare to how the original version was and why so many companies insist on changing the plot. So, mind you, I'm reading off Wikipedia here. I never saw a stage version, so I can't confirm how much of this is still true. I know there's a different version that came out in the 70s, but this is the definitive 1903 version that inspired all of these movies and plays and whatnot. So bear with me here. Okay, so orphans Alan and Jane are the wards of their wicked Uncle Barnaby, who wants to steal their inheritance. He arranges with two sailors, Gonzorgo and Rodrigo, for them to be shipwrecked and lost at sea. But they are rescued by the Romani and return to Mary Contrary's garden. Mary Contrary, the eldest daughter of the widow Piper, believes her beloved Alan is dead and has run away with her brother Tom Tom rather than agree to marry Barnaby. After a second attempt on their lives, Alan and Jane are abandoned in the forest of no return. In the spider's den, they are protected by the Moth Queen. Old Mother Hubbard's shoe is threatened with foreclosure by Barnaby. That is the first part. The second part. Alan and Jane arrive in Toyland, where they find that Mary Contrary and Tom Tom are seeking protection from the master toymaker, who is an evil genius that plots with Barnaby to create toys that kill and maim children. The demonically possessed dolls, however, the demonically possessed dolls turn on the toymaker and kill him. Barnaby uses this information to have Alan blamed for it and sentenced to death. Mary Contrary agrees to marry Barnaby in exchange for Alan's freedom. But after he marries her, Barnaby tries to kill Alan anyway. Unfortunately, Barnaby accidentally drinks a glass of poison wine that was meant for Alan, and he dies. Tom Tom reveals that an old law of Toyland permits marriage between a widow and a condemned man on the condition that he supports her, and which saves Alan from the gallows. And then they get married and live happily ever after.
What?
Yeah. So we essentially have two nobodies as a focus, who are the reason why Barnaby is going through all this shit, because one of the orphans is the love interest of Mary Contrary, and they pretty much go through the same thing Tom Tom goes through, but they escape, and they unfortunately are caught again by Barnaby, who tries to leave them in the forest to die, but they end up in Toyland, and it turns out that the toy maker is evil in this version, which kind of makes sense given Ed Wynn's character when you think about it. So, yeah.
It reminds me of kind of like the Demon Magician. I don't know if you ever seen that Doctor Who review that Linkar did, but there's this Demon Magician, and just like, now you have the toy maker who makes demonic toys who are alive.
I mean, it makes sense why the soldier suddenly came alive. He was apparently, like, practicing with demon magic.
Wow.
Like,
and why he was against science and gloomy. Like, this
this makes so much sense.
Everything in a different light. Like, okay.
I told you, the original version's wild, and you can see why nobody would dare, like, make a modern version of that, because that would terrify kids, you know, to see, like, because, again, these are supposed to be, like, young, like, teenagers at the most, and these adults are just scheming to kill them. And in a world that's supposed to be, like, whimsical, based on fairy tales and toys, it's like, this is horrifying. And then they have a convoluted reason for sparing Alan at the end so they can marry. It's like, this makes no sense. Like, who the hell wrote this?
Oh, God. There's a lot that I'm thinking about right now. It's like my brain's trying to process this, and then I'm just... like, it does make more sense, but at the same time, like, why not just make the toy maker at least evil? But, God, Doug, say something.
It sounds like somebody was really, really high when they wrote that.
Or they really hated children.
Yeah, that too.
Jesus Christ. Like, that scene in Monty Python and the Holy Grail, that's my feelings right now, because I'm trying to process, and I am error 404. I am not found.
I'm surprised Roald Dahl didn't write this. This is something you'd read out of one of his books.
Like, I kind of like the idea of the toy maker being evil and putting toys, but like the toys are alive and he has demon magic, and Barnaby dies from poison. Cusco's poison. Barnaby's poison. Wow.
Like it makes the Disney version sound much better when you think about it.
Yeah.
Which isn't saying much, let's be honest here.
So this was a journey. like I'm just gonna say right now, when I sat down to watch Babes in Toyland, I didn't expect any of this. And we went from the Disney version to the Laurel and Hardy version to learning about the original operetta. And I just want to watch more of Laurel and Hardy now, because what the fuck?
Yeah, even the 1986 version, like, while it's still a bad movie, at least some things are a little more tolerable. At least it has a coherent plot, which honestly isn't saying much. Although, they do have Pat Morita as the toy maker, and he's easily the best version of the toy maker I've seen so far. And it's actually strongly hinted he also might be Santa Claus. So, it's worth watching if just for that part. But, yeah, just, I don't know, like, anytime I watch anything other than the Laurel and Hardy version, I'm just like, dude, what was the mindset behind this? It just, where at any point in the writer's room did this make sense?
Yeah, there's just a lot. And it's like, I get Disney wanting to make something, like Disney's made adaptations of stuff before. A lot of books. I'm glad they didn't make an adaptation of the sequel to 101 Dalmatians, because apparently there's space dogs that talk and the end of the world.
Oh, Dominic Noble.
Well, you want to know what the almost tragic thing about this is? This almost prevented Mary Poppins from being made. Because
that's a huge shame.
Yeah, because this was the first ever, like, full-on adapted musical that Disney had ever did. And it was not well received even back then. Like, some people still like it because, they're classic Disney lovers, but yeah, this was not well received. And so they did not attempt another musical again until Mary Poppins. And they considered it taking a huge risk with that movie. So, like, they were really iffy because, it was going to be just a regular movie. And then, of course, they decided to make it a musical. And they're like, well, we don't know. But then, thankfully, they had the Sherman brothers. Rest in peace, Richard Sherman, by the way.
Yeah, we just lost the second Sherman. Rest in peace.
But like I said, this movie almost did it in. Because, Disney, was known for musicals. It's animated musicals. And some of, like, the live-action stuff, too, had good songs. So, like, to think that this movie was so bad that it almost killed that, like, thank God that didn't happen. Like,
thank God, especially because when we do get to Mary Poppins, like, Mary Poppins is one of my favorite films of all time. And it's just like, I see where this went wrong, but it's like, I don't think it's entirely its fault. I think it was a lot of things behind the scenes, changing it up. And as a musical, like, there are better musicals as we go. It's just, it's the problem wasn't that it was a musical. The problem was they were trying to adapt an operetta into a film. And heck, I would say, like, very rarely a musical does well in film media. We've seen what happened to the Phantom of the Opera and Les Mis and a few others. It occasionally does well. I hear that West Side Story was really good, but
it got nominated for Oscars for crying out loud.
Yeah, like I really need to see West Side Story. It looks great, but like.
It's dated, but it definitely has talent behind it, so I'll give it that much.
Yeah, so it's just a shame because a lot of times when it comes to bring theater, musicals, or operettas into the big screen, it doesn't go great. And this was the 60s, so it's just, I feel that was the problem. This was the first operetta that they tried to adapt. And, they previously did books and turn them into musicals. It feels like a shoo-in when you put it on paper because a lot of Disney's animated films were based on books that turn into musicals. Why not just adapt an already existing musical to make it easier? I think the live action twist was a little bit much though.
Yeah, I think they chose the worst parts of the original plot and just kind of got carried away with it. Because yeah, like I said, this play is not as dark as it could have been, but the signs are there. It's like, you could have made better choices with this. I get you didn't want to copy, March of the Wooden Soldiers, but again, better choices.
Yeah. All right. With that said, I'm gonna give it to Doug for his final thoughts. Doug.
Yeah, like I said, with this whole thing, I think there might be, certainly go watch the Laurel and Hardy, Babes in Toyland, March of the Wooden Soldiers. This one, it's like, if you want to watch it for your, technical reasons, to watch it because it looks nice, and maybe for the one song, the Slowly He Sank, then fine. Otherwise, I would say skip.
Cat.
Yeah, I would give this a definite skip. Like I said, there's some merits to it. It has good production values. Some of the actors actually are trying and doing the best with the limited material they work with. Like I said, one or two songs are fun to listen to, but yeah, like I said, there are way better versions out there, and I know that's not saying much, but trust me, there are. And not to mention the whole sexist, racist angle that they choose to go with some of the songs and scenes. Yeah, I would make this a definite skip. Like, the fact that Disney hasn't put a warning on this, which they tend to do with a lot of their older stuff, before you even watch it, like, kind of raises some red flags for me. But it is what it is. People are going to look at classics like this through tinted glasses. I understand some of the classic Disney lovers still love this for whatever reason. I personally didn't enjoy it, and I don't recommend it. But if you're curious, watch it, but watch the better version, March of the Wooden Soldiers. You will not be disappointed.
Yeah. My final thoughts. We tend to get a lot of comments from people who like classic Disney films back when times were different, defending things in certain things, saying we just didn't understand or we weren't paying attention. I don't know what to tell you guys. Like, I put a lot of effort into my watch through of these films. I don't think some of them really hold up. And yeah, sometimes I've been wrong, but in this case, I do not care for this version of the film. I think it's a definite skip. I think you should definitely try out the free Laurel and Hardy version or one of the other Babes in Toyland versions available. Now, if you do enjoy certain eras of Disney, like I know people who really loved the prairie country era, the cowboy era, some people like certain eras of Disney, and I'm not going to hold that against you. I'm just saying, like, certain things don't hold up, especially for a modern audience, and I mean, like, a lot of people look back at our past stuff and they're like, oh my god, you don't get Johnny Tremaine. It's like, I don't want to get Johnny Tremaine. I don't want to get some of these old films because, to me, they're incredibly outdated. That's just how things are for me, and I feel like this is a perfect microcosm of stuff like that, or Tonka, where maybe at the time it was okay, but now it just feels mean-spirited, racist, outdated, and stuff like that. That's just how I feel. So call me a meanie if you will, but I just didn't care for it. With that being said, I'm Zenith Warrior Princess, the cutest of ghost buns.
I'm Kat McBerry.
I'm Doug McBerry.
And now, it is time for me to end this without my usual catchphrase, but with song, as I will sing my favorite song for the film. We enjoy committing mayhem for a monetary gain, and we specialize in crimes which are completely inhumane. Now we're on our way to steal some sheep and drown a boy at sea, and then directly we'll collect a very handsome fee, and we won't be happy till we get it. We won't be happy till we get it. And just remember, classic Disney doesn't always hold up.